Joining me right now is a friend of mine from a decade ago or so. We're both lecturing for the Academy of Complementary and Integrative Medicine. Dr. Michelle LaMasa-Dawson joins us. I guess we became buds years ago. You were on TV with us 5 years ago or so. And I can't quit thinking of what you do for a living. I'm the author of Know the Cause. I think fungus is absolutely everything. Along comes Michelle, and I'm listening to her on that podium. She says, trauma from your past may be causing, or may cause in the future, your illness. She's saying, if you don't forgive, then you better forget. Things that just hit me when I was in that audience. Michelle, thank you for joining me right now.
Thank you so much.
It's called recall healing. What happened in the past shapes our future. Teach us a little bit about that, and congratulations, you've come a long way with this.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's so exciting to see it growing, and and I think because it makes sense. It's not outside of common sense, and so when you really start to look at the things that have happened in your life and how, we're not blank slates when we're born, that the traumas of our parents and our ancestors play a role in what is happening in our life now. The way that we look at things has a role in that. And all of that contributes to what our body is experiencing. And so we look at that in a very specific way to help a person to unpack the bag, to process things, and ultimately to let them go and to have a different life.
It's so important. And I heard we did some filming for television here while we had you today via Zoom. Loved what you were saying, and there were so many pearls in all of that. One of them was, Doug, when we're dealing with a child who has issues, we talk to mom and dad. And Michelle said, if I can use the word regress, I'll recall everything about mom and dad during that pregnancy, the gestational period. Wow, that hit me. You mean when mom and dad are shouting at each other with a fetus, that fetus can pick that up and maybe later in life have problems because of that? I've never thought of that.
Oh, absolutely. I see this time and time again, that many, many times when parents are having issues, and then later on something shows up, let's say 5 years old, my go-to would be, what happened at 5 months of pregnancy? What was going on? One of the parents that I worked with, her daughter wouldn't even go to her father. Well, it was based on what had happened in the pregnancy where dad had cheated on mom. They worked it all out, but the daughter was still carrying those feelings of mom. And when she talked to her while she slept at night, she released her, and it was so cute because the next session she said, oh my gosh, she was so happy with her dad. She loves her dad. It transformed in one little night that I said this to her.
You see, and the answer for that traditionally is Zoloft. The little girl obviously has social anxiety, won't talk to her dad, she needs Zoloft. It's so amazing the way you stare in the face of allopathic medicine, which, by the by, Dr. Dawson, is life-saving sometimes. I mean, there are tumors that need cutting out. There are antibiotics that cure a bacterial infection that could have metastasized. I'm all for it. But far too often, M.D. stands for me, doctor. I have all the answers. And people with Ph.D. degrees like yourself and your partners and so forth really are sitting by idly saying, wait a minute, remember when that bully hit you in the face in high school? That's probably the reason you're having esteem problems now. Is that what recall healing is?
Yeah, well, I would say that, and I would also say that mom and dad so often have had low self-esteem and give that to the child, and it manifests in the child as well. So everything that mom and dad were feeling, I hate myself, I don't love myself, then the child expresses that because the child becomes, in their biology, the psychological suffering of the parents.
Wow. Another thing that struck me through the path of my lifetime, someone came up to me, it was a guy that was in Vietnam the year before I was. We were both medics, corpsmen, trained. And he said to me, when were you there? And I said, 1970, 71. And he said, how many wives have you had? Okay, one. It's so common for people, and you talk about trauma, that's a year of wildness. Apparently, it's so common for we Vietnam veterans, Korean, World War II, et cetera, Afghanistan now, to have relationship problems. You see not only symptomatic illness problems, but you also see a lot of relational patients there in your clinic. People are having a hard time getting together, but the missing link is it's something you, Mr. or you, Miss, had in your past that you need to talk about. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I would say you, Mr. and you, Miss, and they mirror each other, and it shows up in the relationship, and it expresses the same pain and suffering that they received as children in their relationship. They think it's the other person, but when both go back, do the work related to mom and dad, and the truth is mom and dad were doing the best they could with the resources that they had. But they weren't given the tools as well. And so we're coming from long generations of not having the proper tools on how to really have and navigate relationship. So when you have this new understanding that my relationship is a mirror, let me do my work, things begin to transform on the relational level like never before.
You and I are in such a similar space because you folks tell people to recall healing is going back maybe to a trauma in your life or the way you were raised as a child and seeing that as a portion of why you're having ill health or relationship problems today. But you always say to the person, I don't hear doctors doing this because they have a minute with each patient, and that is, look at me, tell me when this began. Tell me when your cancer, your prostate cancer. Tell me when your anger issues. Why do you have road rage? Tell me when this began. And a doctor would just say, road rage, Prozac, But then you use a word that I love, and I've always heard you say this on the podium, on television, etc., and that is forgive. Teach me about that. Is that essential?
Forgiveness is essential. And I recognize that there are really challenging things to forgive, and that many people don't deserve forgiveness. And yet we deserve the forgiveness because for our brain, the other person does not exist. So anything that we're feeling about someone else is going to be downloaded, especially if it spins in our mind any length of time. It's going to be downloaded into our own body. Our body will help us with that. But that anger, that upset, that hurt, justifiable, it affects us, not the other person. And so when we can name it and claim the pain and suffering, giving ourselves the honor, really honoring what we have experienced, it's much easier to let it go and move on.
Powerfully said. Recall Healing, folks, I like this, right off of her website. By the way, recallhealingusa.com or Soul Tree Transformations, plural, Soul Tree Transformations.com. Recall Healing, we work at identifying and solving the emotional trauma behind the condition or behavior. Dare I say, do you sometimes find yourself competing with psychologists slash psychiatrists, psychologists being Ph.D., psychiatrists being M.D.s? In other words, if I have anger issues or relationship problems, do I need to go on a medication and lay on a couch and talk about it? Or does an option exist? I think most people, most doctors don't really understand, and that's where you came into the field many years ago, called Recall Healing.
Yes, and I love that. And I know that there really is a time and a place for medication. However, I absolutely believe that diet and movement and working the emotional trauma, getting some tools, accessing joy, it really can transform a person's life without having medication. I had a client that was 35 years on medication and had been to many psychiatrists and has transformed completely his life and is no longer on medication, is no longer depressed, and is working so many things, but made many different connections about how his grandfather died of a heart attack. And that can contribute to depression in the next generation. And many other things that he made connections about that transformed his way of being in this world.
I see this as really being a movement for the entire 21st century. I mean, the stress, the trauma we're going through now as Americans, or globally, we're all going through this with various viruses coming on, wondering what is going on behind the scenes, et cetera. A lot of stress there. Tell me, you have 3 sons. What can we do with our children or grandchildren to help participate in your work of recall healing? In other words, how can we make their childhood, their adolescence, really pop, really be so wonderful that they won't have this problem 20 years from now?
Well, I think that teaching these tools, I would love to see these tools taught in school from day one, teaching kids how to navigate stress, breathing techniques, and loving themselves, and understanding that even if a person comes as a mistake, nobody is a mistake. We are all here divinely so, that God intended us all to be here. And so when we have these understanding, when we teach our children about that, then many things, end up being different. It doesn't mean that our kids are not going to go through challenges, because I watched my boys going through challenges. I have 3 adult boys, and they have been through challenges, and yet all of them have tools to be able to navigate. My youngest, who I learned recall healing when he was a little guy, it's so great because he'll say, "Hey, Mama, what does this mean? Hey, Mama, what does this mean? How can I work on this?" And so he has some great tools at 24 years old to be able to work through many of of life's challenges.
Do you find, you and I know the Lord, do you find that there are spiritual obstacles to really releasing and fixing our problems?
I absolutely believe, and especially in this time, I really believe it is good versus evil. It's not blue and red and all of the other things that have been kind of taught, and this whole divisiveness, because that is, for me, that is Satan that is trying to divide us. And so when we really get to know and love ourselves and really try to be in connection with the greater, it really does make a huge difference. But spiritual warfare, absolutely believe. And all of the things from our ancestors, and the lack and the addictions, and the lack of money, food, shelter, clothing, that really does play a role in what is taking place right now.
And finally, Dr. Dawson, teach us a little bit about how to get in touch with you and what to expect once we do.
So you can find me on recallhealingusa.com or soultreetransformations.com. I teach workshops, about every other month in the United States, that I teach online, so everybody can come online, which is wonderful. And I also do sessions, and I tell people to plan, 3 to 6 sessions. But even after one session, you get insight, and as I grow, I have some other facilitators that are doing this work as well, and so it's growing and really making more sense for people, and in a bigger way. And so I'm so grateful that I get to do this work and teach these tools to people. It's so gratifying.
Listen, you're one of my heroes. This is so exciting to hear. Folks, are we dumping our stress, or will we bury it 6 foot under with our bones? What Dr. Dawson is saying is, through recall healing, you'll be able to see things that you never saw before. What's the relationship between being picked on as a 13-year-old and your mental stress, trauma, and need for medication today? Is there one? That's where Dr. Dawson could help you. Thank you so much for letting us learn. You're really very large in my mind all the time, because you're right. Know the cause is my motto. Sometimes the cause is fungus or sugar you're eating too much of, soda pops, etc. But sometimes you don't even know the cause, but you need a pro to help you unravel it. That's where Dr. Dawson comes in. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Good to
You're
see you.
awesome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to see you.